really want to make sure that I'm not gonna... We gotta do this before the camera overheats. On this day, 250 years ago, the United States of America, or I guess what would become the United States of America, or what immediately became the United States of America, declared its independence from the British Empire, July 4th, 1976. Wait, 1976? 1776. Why do I... Oh, I've got 19 on the brain because I'm always talking about 1900s type stuff. But actually today we might dive into the 1800s a little bit. 1776, a date that will live in infamy, with a little bit of help, actually quite a bit of help, from the French, also the Spanish, and pretty much any of the other empires in the world at the time that really just wanted to stick it to the British. And as a result, this nation was founded. Now, it wasn't all sunshine and roses, especially initially with the original government that this nation built, the Articles of Confederation. A lot of people don't know this, actually, but a lot of people think like, oh, Declaration of Independence, and then we ratified the Constitution, and then bam, this nation was just perfect and formed immediately, and it was amazing, and no one had any complaints ever. No, that is not true at all. A lot of people maybe would forget about the Articles of Confederation, which for those who don't know, all the founding fathers and everyone came together and said, let's make a government, and the first government they wrote was the Articles of Confederation, which lasted about 10 years. It was not super good. It gave way too much power to the states. Because of course the whole point of America was we're really scared of a big, beefy, tyrannical federal government, so the states need to have as much power as possible, and especially under the Articles of Confederation. If you think the early Constitution was very, like, state-heavy, the Articles of Confederation were very state-heavy. The individual states actually genuinely had more power than the national government that tried to hold them all together. Every single state had its own currency, has its own laws, as they do now today, but it was even worse back then. So after 10 years, the Articles of Confederation was disbanded, and then we wrote the Constitution, which is still going strong to this day as as the official document that structures how our government works in this country. But I do think the Constitution and the government that we have is pretty well built and is a pretty cool thing that they were able to do. I'm really waffling on. I guess I should say I'm really not an expert in history, really past like 1860, and especially that outside of military history or standard political history of the founding of nations and governments and all that. I am really, really not even close to being anywhere knowledgeable on that. Really all I can pull from is like my high school education in history class. I am much better at relating things to military history and specifically tanks and then now really firearms, which is the topic of today. I'm sure you are all wondering, Edo, what are you waffling about? Why are we talking about all this on the birth of our nation 250 years? So, as is probably the thumbnail and title and everything else of this video, as you can probably guess, today I wanted to look at a lot of American history through the lens of firearms that, in my opinion, either are American or relate very heavily to America and other things. Being able to appreciate them through the lens of, fuck yeah, America. Now, there are plenty of other people who have much more complete collections of American firearms than I do. There is a fantastic video by Hickok45 that was posted like 13 years ago that I still think is like by far one of the best versions of this ever done, of every single service rifle from the US, from, I think literally he has from 1776 all the way up to the M16. Behind me, of course, we have on the wall, the venerable M1 Garand, the M1 Garand. We have talked about this already on the channel. I already have a video on both the M1 Garand and the 1903, talking about the two of them in a pair. I guess this is a fitting rifle to talk about first in the United States. In the history of American firearms, I mean, this is just iconic, isn't it? This is literally, it is quite possibly, besides the M16, this is quite possibly the American rifle. I think this is more recognizable, this is more unanimous, synonymous with the US, with America, God bless it. And actually, before I get carried away, allow me to treat you early on in the video. Ooh, that is like butter. Smooth and loud. Just like butter. Let's do a fun thing where the next gun we're gonna talk about is on the wall behind me. So this is the next gun in the queue, and then this is obviously what we're talking about right now. So John Cassius Garand, obviously a Canadian immigrant who moves to the United States and develops what was widely considered the best rifle of World War II. One of the first semi-automatic rifles adopted officially in full capacity by an army as a standard issue service rifle. I know technically the Mexican Mondragon beats the M1 Garand by actually quite a large margin. I think it was actually pre-World War I the Mondragon was about to be adopted. And the Mexican army, as far as I understand it, They adopted the rifle, and then I think while the order was being made, the country fell into civil war, or there was a revolution, or something like along those lines. And then turned out it was gonna be too expensive, and the new government took over and said, what the fuck, we don't want this. And then they did not actually, as far as I know, the Mexican army did not actually receive any Mondragons overseas. Like, none were actually successfully shipped to the army. The army never actually got them. But I do think the M1 Garand takes the cake for like officially adopted and got in everyone's hands. The Soviets were not far behind with the SVT-40, and I would love to have an SVT-40 for my collection, but unfortunately the war caused the Soviets to sort of half abandon the SVT-40 and go back to the good old Mosin. Whereas the United States, once again, entering the war late and being across the pond, did not really have to worry about that, and we could just keep cranking out M1 Garands unopposed. We were not worried about our factories being bombed or having to go back to the old thing to make up for numbers. We just did it. Not to say that it was easy to make M1 Garands. I actually think there is a fantastic video out there by CN Arsenal talking to their animator Bruno about the M1 Garand and about why it's actually quite possibly one of the worst semi-automatic rifles ever devised. Well, no, not, that's a little too harsh, but there's a lot about the M1 Garand that we all just look at and go, oh, well, this is perfect and amazing and no one else could do it as good as America. But in reality, there's a lot of weird, quirky features to the M1 Garand, and the Garand itself is just, it's an odd rifle. And honestly, the fact that it actually really exists and the fact that it works, like, at all, is actually quite astonishing. But there's a lot of features of this gun that didn't have to be. As they say in the video, there's not a single straight line on this damn gun. And I think there's, I mean, I can count like 2 or 3, but that's about it. This gun is the geometry of it, especially the receiver, the geometry is very, very weird. And it's not a lot of straight lines. And also, it is, at the end of the day, I mean, if you look at it, it's a traditional, you know, rotating bolt style system with a gigantic op rod grafted onto the side that runs along the gun and then bends downwards and goes under the barrel. Like, it's very weird. Like, it is not a sort of what especially we would consider today the way that you should do a semi-automatic rifle. Also, en-bloc feeding. En-bloc feeding is, like, at this point in the mid-1930s, kind of a weird choice. I mean, detachable box magazines certainly existed. I mean, they weren't insanely reliable, not like today's standards, but they existed and they were good and you could have done it. But yeah, I mean, it is the Garand. I mean, what else do you want me to say about it? It's a great rifle to shoot. It's very well balanced. It is a little on the heavy side, like just a little bit, but not so much that it's like really a problem, I think. I think this thing is great. And this particular rifle of mine was got at the CMP. It was rebuilt to basically competition rifle standards. It's pretty freaking cool. It's pretty incredible, actually. I like it a lot. If the zombie apocalypse started, or if the government collapsed and we had to wander the wastelands with a rifle, I actually unironically think I would pick this out of all the guns in my collection, because people say, what is the best gun? Well, honestly, it's what's the best gun for you? What is the gun that you shoot the best with, that you can get good groupings with, you understand its quirks, you understand how to use it, you understand how to load it. Like, you know, what is your gun? Even if it's not objectively the best gun you could pick, if it's the gun that works best for you in that situation, then it is, for you, the best gun. And for me, it's my Garand. And there's nothing wrong with it. It is like, the weirdest thing about the Garand is that it works, despite how weird of a design it is, how unique of a design it is, how American of a design it is, despite being designed by a Canadian, which I actually would argue is one of the most American things about it. Because I do think America does have a really great history of taking ideas, taking not as in stealing, although we have done a lot of that, but taking as in incorporating. I mean, we talk about America as this the great melting pot of cultures and people. And I mean, I think something like the Garand really like helps that a lot. Like, yeah, someone from Canada, someone from elsewhere in the world can move to America and build a new life here and contribute to their nation. I mean, I think of William Knudsen. William Knudsen from tank history, with working with Albert Kahn and working with President Roosevelt to build the Detroit tank arsenal, becoming the commissioner of industrial production in World War II. He was a Danish immigrant. He moved here in 1900, and he built a new life for himself here. And then he was an industrial man who worked in General Motors and who worked for Ford for a long time. And you know, he was a very successful industrial man here in the United States, helping cultivate what was the automobile industry in the US from the 20s and 30s. And then when President Roosevelt called upon him to be the commissioner of industrial production, he answered the call and he said, when my country calls, I go. Like, he's a Danish immigrant, but he moved here and he made a life for himself here that when his nation called him, he, without hesitation, said yes. And I think that's the beautiful thing about America. And you can hold on to, you can still say like, yeah, I'm from this country, like I'm from other places, and you know, my family heritage is other places, but we're here now, you know? We're here in America, we make this country the best it can be. And I think that's awesome. Like, to me, that is like the great American achievement, is taking people from all over the world and uniting them under one banner. Anyway, that was oddly philosophical. Great rifle. You guys know it. You love it. It's fantastic. One of the best rifles that we have ever devised as a country. Before we move on, one more for the road. Beautiful. Great gun, great piece of Americana. Great way to start off the video, I think. The M1 Garand. Next rifle on our list, the Springfield model of 1903. Now, for those of you who follow my channel and already know everything about what I'm trying to do with my gun collection, I am indeed trying to collect all of the standard issue service rifles of all the major combatants of the First World War. And actually, as of recording this video, I have pretty much accomplished that goal. But the Springfield 1903, I mean, what can I say? It is, well, it's a Mauser-style rifle. This is the America's first, I was gonna say first proper rifle, but it's not really true. I wish I had a Krag Jorgensen in my collection. I really do. But I really like, again, what CN Arsenal, what Matthias said about this in his video. Again, the video that he did with Bruno, their animator, where he said how he believed that the 1903 was actually the least American rifle we've ever adopted. And I kind of see what he means by that. And he goes through his reasoning of the sense that U.S. Army ordnance throughout history has always been really weird and particular about one thing in its head that it really wants the rifle to be able to do. And it gets stuck on that, and it refuses to compromise. Like, for example, the Krag Jorgensen, you'd be able to top up the magazine of the rifle while still having one in the chamber, which of course the unique feed mechanism of the Krag Jorgensen allowed for that. But the idea is that U.S. Army Ordnance got so fixated on that one criteria that they were willing to give up so many others for it. And the Krag Jorgensen, while yeah, you were able to top up the magazine with one in the chamber, the rest of the rifle was not as good as all the Mauser rifles that everyone was adopting around the same time. And kind of getting fixated on those things, and we're to the point where you get the M1 Garand, which is like, why is it M-block fed? And why is it basically a turn bolt action rifle with a gas piston grafted to it and a bent op rod? Like, why? Like, why didn't you just do something, honestly, much more akin to what the Soviets were doing? Like, I do think the Tokarev and Semenov rifles of the late 30s were much closer in line to what we think of today as how to do a semi-automatic gas-driven rifle, but we didn't. And so, yeah, Ordnance tends to get its heads fixated on these things, and then the rifle you get is just kind of like, yeah, it's not bad, but why? Whereas this is just a Mauser. Now, to be fair, I do think the sights are the one thing that U.S. Army Ordnance was fixated on because there's a strong history of marksmanship in the United States Army, always been very proud of being good marksmen. I think all the way back since the Minutemen of the Revolutionary War, there's always been a strong tradition of the effectiveness of the American marksman. So this rifle, quite famously, has basically competition target style sights, which I do absolutely hate. I think I've made my opinion on these sights known several times. I absolutely hate the sights on the 1903. I really do think they are terrible, and every time I shoot this rifle, it is by far the worst experience. But otherwise, it's great. I mean, it's 30-06. It's got quite some kick to it for being a much lightweight rifle. If I'm not mistaken, this is a 24-inch barrel. I'll put corrections up on screen if I need to, but otherwise, I mean, it's a Mauser. It's a standard bolt-action Mauser. There's not really any, there's not a ping that I can give you with this, but I can open it, close it for you if you want. The Springfield model 1903. This thing is fun with terrible sights. But thankfully, I think in World War I, we did end up with something much better. Oh, I should definitely, of course, mention the extensive history of the 1903 being used in World War II as well, obviously, by the Marine Corps. And actually even the Army, landing, there's photos of the U.S. Army in North Africa, some guys with 1903s. Again, people forget and think about the M1 Garand as being, the World War II rifle, but going into World War II, we did not have enough Garands to equip everyone, and there were certainly plenty of 1903s flying around. This is a Remington produced model of 1917, an American rifle of World War I, although actually, once again, it's not really an American rifle. It is a British rifle that the Americans stole and rechambered, and it's fucking fantastic. It is the best rifle of World War I think, pretty easily. The SMLE, I still have a real soft spot in my heart for the SMLE. I love that rifle so very much. I am, at the end of the day, a big Lee Enfield fanboy. But what I love about this rifle in particular is the fact that it kind of is the best of a Mauser and an Enfield. Like, it really is those two rifle design philosophies coming together. But it's got that signature Lee Enfield quickness to it and smoothness to it. Because even, I mean, the Mauser rifles are smooth. They're very smooth. But the Lee Enfield, the positioning of the bolt on the Lee Enfield, being right here by your trigger finger, what I like the most and what really makes it feel like a Lee Enfield to me is its cock on close. it's got that cock-on closeness to it. So it feels so familiar. And as somebody who, my first firearm that I ever owned was a Lee Enfield No. 4, and someone who has quite a fondness for Lee Enfields. Lee Enfields have always felt so smooth and so good to just use. And to me, like, nothing has really truly gotten there. This gets there. This brings that that Lee Enfield oomph. Like, there's just, to me, the cock on close. People love cock on open. Cock on open is fine. No major issues with it. It's fine. But I prefer cock on close. There's just something about that when you just on that return stroke, just giving it that oomph, giving it your all in that return stroke, and it just lends you to such fast operation. The feel of the rifle, it feels like a Lee Enfield, but it doesn't work like a Lee Enfield. All on a rifle with fantastic sights, by the way. Incredible sights, and dare I say that this rifle changed the trajectory of American rifle development forever. The American experience with these sights is what led us, not just to the Springfield 1903 A3, but I think is what led us to develop the sights that end up on the M1 Garand. And then obviously the sights on the M1 Garand are fantastic and amazing, not changed very much on the M16. Like, if you look at modern M16, sight picture is basically the same as the M1 Garand, which in my opinion was developed off of this. I think the British really understood the human elements of designing a rifle. It's just got to feel right to use. The safety has to be in an ergonomic position. The sights just have to be good. Like, I think the Brits always really understood that. And everything with the Lee Enfields have always been that way. This particular rifle is an all-matching, original Remington produced rifle. The date on the receiver, the serial number on the receiver for the rifle matches to July of 1918, and then right on the barrel is stamped 7-18. So July of 1918, the barrel and the receiver are matching. It's got all Remington parts. It's got R stamped all over it where it should. It's got U.S. Ordnance flaming bombs all over it, right where it should, all in the correct places. It's perfect. It's literally perfect, and it works great. I've shot it already twice now, actually 3 times I think, because it's just that good. It feels like an Enfield. It's just better in every way. And again, what fascinates me about this rifle too is it was like by far the best rifle of World War I, and yet both nations abandoned it after the war. The British were moving to this, like Pattern 14 was supposed to replace the SMLE, but then the break out of the war, they had to crank out SMLEs back home, and they, contracted out production of these rifles to America. But by the time of the war, Britain cranked out more SMLEs than they did Pattern 14. But the First World War actually proved that it's a good enough rifle, which is very British. They say, yeah, the SMLE is good enough, and we have a shit ton of them now because we built so many of them in the war. And they're standardized in production now in Australia and now in the British Raj and all that. Like, let's just keep it. And then the Americans analyzed this after the war and said between this and the 1903, and I think the Americans even admitted that this was the better rifle. But then it came down to, well, the 1903 is the design that we were building at Rock Island, at Springfield. Like, it's the rifle that our domestic arsenals know how to make. And it is still like the American rifle. Like, this is a borrowed design that we had to use as substitute standard just because we couldn't make enough 1903s. Our heart still lies with the 1903. To me, it is fascinating that this rifle was so good, and yet, after World War I, abandoned by both of its home nations. Very cool, very interesting, and a really cool thing to have in the collection, and honestly, much better than the 1903. It's a little longer. I think this is I think the 1903 is a 24-inch barrel, and this is a 26-inch barrel. So it's a little longer, not by much. And people would always say, when I see people talk about these rifles, they would always talk about how, like, oh, it's a little heavier than the 1903. It's a little heavier. I was expecting it to be, like, noticeably heavier. It's really not. Like, actually, if anything, like, it feels fantastic. Like, I always saw this rifle as, it was longer, it was a bit fatter, it was a bit bulkier, like, oh, and everyone says it's a bit heavier. So, like, I was expecting to pick this thing up and it'd be, like, a bit of a tank compared to the 1903. No, man, not at all. Like, I think this rifle it feels just as light as the 1903. Sometimes I pick this thing up and I think it's lighter. Like, I really don't know. The distribution is different. The 1903 feels real beefy right here in the middle. The 1917 feels like its weight is more further back. All of its weight is kind of back here. And since that weight's closer to you, it does give, I really do feel like out here where my left hand is, it's very floaty. It points really nicely. It just floats. Yeah. I mean, this rifle is still overall, oh, actually, you know what? Nah, this thing is quite light. This thing is quite light, actually. I mean, you can just Google it. You can just Google the weight of how heavy each rifle is. But it's not far off. This is a little heavier, but it's, I don't know, it's barely noticeable. I never did drill or anything. I wasn't in ROTC, or I don't know any rifle drills. I'm just spinning them because I think it's cool. Continuing, so, where was I? Oh, yes. This thing. Next up, this guy. Oh, what a great, great little gun this is. The Winchester model of 1897. Despite all the American firearms we've talked about so far, this is our first Browning, which is actually quite surprising. And in fact, is it the only Browning I have in my collection? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. This is the only Browning gun I have in my collection, which is actually kind of crazy to think about. But here it is, the Winchester 1897. Now I have an entire video dedicated to the shotgun and kind of more my opinions on it and its history and all that fun stuff. But basically, really widely considered to be the first modern pump-action shotgun, because it was not the first. The Spencer's beats this out. And it wasn't even the first commercially successful, because again, the Spencer's was commercially successful. And as far as I know, the history is that this was designed, Winchester told John Browning, hey, make a shotgun that's better than the Spencer's because we want to get into the pump action market, which John Browning kind of already wanted to do because he wanted to go pump action, but then they made him design the 1887 lever action shotgun, now of Terminator fame and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 fame and other famous appearances of that shotgun. But John Browning did not want to make that shotgun. And Winchester said, no, you're gonna make a lever shotgun. And then he did, and as far as I know, the 1887 did not sell all that well. And then they said, okay, fine, you can make a pump gun. And he built essentially what was this, but of course this originally started out life as the 1893 pump action shotgun. Only difference is it was chambered in black powder, whereas this, the 1897, was chambered in smokeless powder. So I can shoot it with modern ammunition to this day, which is pretty great. This is still to this day, despite how big my collection has gotten, this is still my oldest gun in terms of actual production date. Date all the way back to 1910. So this exact shotgun was put together in 1910. The second gun I ever purchased. Yeah, because I had the Lee Enfield, and the whole thing was I want to have something a little more practical than a bolt-action rifle and a .303 cartridge. So this is my second gun I ever got, and is still my oldest gun. And this thing is going strong. This thing has still never malfunctioned on me once. This thing is so much fun to shoot. It just works. It's cool because it comes apart, which is fucking awesome. The fact that this is even a thing of a shotgun this old, the fact that even back then they thought of features like that, so cool. And it's always a hoot and a holler whenever I shoot it out with friends. Put that in, twist it to lock it in place. There we go. Excellent. Still viable very much so to this day. And I love that it has the external hammer. So you can do a half cock safety, you can full cock it if you want. You can have one in the chamber, put it on half cock and you're on safe, and then you can full cock it, and then you can decock it much easier. I just love the gimmick, I guess. I love the gimmick of the back of the bolt coming out over your hand. I love that the gun basically explodes open when you rack it. It's very visually interesting, it's very cool. It's very short and very handy. Great piece of kit. And a great piece of Americana as well. An American shotgun, and not only that, but American shotgun of World War I. Famously, the 1897, this is the model of shotgun that went into the trenches in World War I. Not nearly in the numbers that people think, and they were not nearly as effective as people think, unfortunately, and the big issue with that was paper shells. You know, they did not have plastic shotgun shells like we do today, so paper shotgun shells in the wet and the mud of World War I would get soggy and would get all fucked up, and then you'd put them in the tube, and your magazine tube would get all gummed up with dissolving paper shells, basically wet cardboard inside your magazine tube. You're gonna get your one shot off, and then the moment you try to rack it, the whole gun's just gonna jam up, and apparently that did happen quite a lot. Now, in dry environments, these were well liked. The inherent design is fantastic, and of course it's just, everyone loves to go on about America bringing a shotgun into the trenches of World War I and being this inspired idea, this uniquely American super weapon, being something as simple as just a pump action shotgun. You know, it very much invokes and speaks to America and the American way of thinking. And it's very cool for that reason, even if those are very much, you know, pumped up legends and not entirely true. It's fun to think about just American cowboys stumbling and being like, y'all Europeans with your long guns, I got something here for you. Awesome. Love that. I just love that aesthetic. And then of course, famously, the Germans declaring these to be war crimes because they thought they caused undue suffering. Again, people don't really understand all that. They just say like, oh, the Germans were so salty about getting blasted with shotguns that they consider them war crimes. No, the Germans didn't declare these to be a war crime because they were getting their asses beat by them. They declared them to be war crimes because they were just looking for a propaganda win against the new opponent that was the United States. And the angle they went for was Americans were barbarians and they did not fight proper war, and they were bad marksmen, which of course was a specific dig at the United States, who were very proud for being very good marksmen. Your soldiers are so poorly trained that they can't hit anything unless you use a shotgun. Of course, the United States official response to this was, no, they don't. If you're really comparing, the official argument from the Germans was that the shotgun spread pellets from a long enough distance, the pellets would simply embed themselves in a person and not actually kill them, and then it would cause undue suffering. You get lead poisoning, and you would you would die a very slow and cruel death. Well, shrapnel from artillery pretty much does the same thing, and we've been using artillery since the dawn of artillery, and nobody's ever brought that up. So if artillery is okay, then so is this. And pretty much that was the end of that. The Germans never really officially had any further claims. But again, they kind of came in, kind of like the BAR, like they kind of came in late in the war, and they were used in such scarce numbers that it's hard to really point to definitive situations where this was like the game changer in the war. Obviously, this one is not a military configuration trench gun. It does not have the bayonet mount, and it does not have the heat shield on top. This is a standard civilian configuration, and I actually think it's had its barrel replaced. I think originally, because the finish on the barrel is a little darker and a little better than the rest of the gun. So I think at some point, previous owner had the barrel on this reworked, and presumably maybe this was originally a civilian full 30-inch barrel shotgun, and then they got the barrel swapped to a 20-inch configuration to make this what is now colloquially dubbed the riot model, this was what you would have seen like police, prison guards, escorts, carriage car guard. I mean, literally what we call now today riding shotgun, right? The whole point was you had a guy who sat in the passenger seat of a carriage, of an old wagon, horse-drawn wagon, and he rode shotgun. He had a shotgun, he kept the thing protected. He would have had one of these. Famously, this is available in Red Dead Redemption 2 because this did just make it in time for that 1899 time frame of Red Dead 2, which is pretty cool. And actually, I have several guns in my collection that actually constitute historically accurate Red Dead 2 loadout, and especially if I get a Krag Jorgensen, then I really truly would have a Red Dead Redemption 2 loadout, which is pretty cool. But I mean, the fact that you actually can, just as a quick cameo, and I know you guys have seen this gun before, but actually wait, have I done a dedicated video on this gun? I don't think I have. But I have this. In case you were wondering, I have this. And this is a Red Dead Redemption 2. Equip these guns in-game in Red Dead 2, and then also have them sitting next to me, this on my desk, and this leaning up against my desk, and be like, I have those. And especially if I get a Krag Jorgensen, then I can really build the full loadout. And if I get a proper revolver that is of proper age, because, spoiler alert, I do now have a revolver. And we'll get to that right after this. All right, now behind me, we have a Mosin and Garand, and we'll get to that in a second. There are two rifles that I want to talk about later, that are not American rifles, but do have importance in American rifle history, American war history, and I want to just have an excuse to show off here on the channel, even though they probably will get their own dedicated videos anyways. But before we get to those rifles, I want to show off one more properly American gun, which is this. A Smith & Wesson model of 1917, a proper original Smith & Wesson model 1917. The pommel, or well, the date on the pommel, actually you can see there. There you are. Serial number on the bottom dates this pistol as September of 1918. So this just actually squeezes in to World War I time frame. So this is a proper World War I production era Smith & Wesson model 1917, and this thing is just cool. It is just awesome. I mean, look at that. Ain't she a beaut? Ah, utterly fantastic. These revolvers were, of course, much like the the Remington model of 1917 rifle. Smith & Wesson model 1917 revolvers were, of course, a reaction to we can't make enough 1911s, so we need a revolver. We need some kind of substitute standard pistol. This particular model of revolver has its evolution or its origins back as the Smith & Wesson triple lock, and then the British wanted them for World War I, but said get rid of that whole triple lock thing because it's a little too complicated. So they simplified it and then started selling them to the British in 455 Webley as I think the British referred to it as the hand ejector Model 1, if I'm not mistaken. And then shortly after, the United States in 1917 said, we need a revolver. And so they went to Smith & Wesson and Colt and said, can you make us revolvers? Smith & Wesson got out the hand ejector Model 1, or the triple lock, now no longer a triple lock, rechambered them for 45 ACP because these needed to be a 45 ACP to match ammunition standard quality with the 1911. But of course, 45 ACP is a rimless cartridge, and revolvers quite famously need rimmed cartridges for the ejector to work, because the ejector needs to be able to grab onto the rim of the cartridge. So what do? Well, what you do is you basically invent speed loaders, and that is what the US had to do. The United States invented, or not invented, but developed, or actually Smith & Wesson specifically, developed half-moon clips, that were used with these revolvers, and they're half moon clips because they need to be able to sit on a pouch nicely. If you have a full moon clip, it's gonna stick out of your belt or whatever you're holding. I do have the clips, and I do have ammunition, but I don't really want to mess around with like live rounds and stuff here on the camera. But just know I do have clips, I do have rounds. I have shot this revolver twice now, and it works great. It's a fantastic little gun. It's very fun to shoot. It doesn't actually recoil nearly as hard as I thought it would. Watching See an Arsenal, they talk about this being a full power revolver. It's a big bore revolver, so it's gonna have some kick. Personally, I thought it was quite pleasant, actually. I felt like it was pretty fun to shoot, although I'm very used to really, really long, heavy, high recoiling guns. Really understanding for the first time in my life the difference between a proper double action and single action trigger pull, how cocking that hammer beforehand and getting that nice crisp trigger pull is so much better than having to like, oh God, it's so much more. You can't feel it on camera, but like my hands start shaking when I'm trying to like, pull the trigger on that. I can totally see why it was such a big deal. And especially for something like the 1911, where you pull the trigger, the slide actuates and cocks the hammer automatically. So every single time you pull the trigger, you get a nice clean break. I can imagine how in the time frame of World War I, that would have been an amazing feature, where you don't have to manually cock it every single time to get a nice trigger pull, because it really does matter. This revolver is not just a proper World War I 1918 Smith & Wesson, but also it has proof marks on it for British standard, and every single chamber is marked with British proof marks. Those features giving this proper World War II Lend-Lease history. Of course, the British in World War II, you know, needing firearms and needing tanks and all sorts of things, a lot of these revolvers ended up in British hands. And I can tell that this is a Lend-Lease version and not a British contract order because, well, first of all, it still says US Army on the bottom, but also the fact that it's still chambered in 45 ACP. Because when the British made orders for these from Smith & Wesson, they ordered them to be chambered in 455 Webley, obviously, because that's the cartridge that they would use. But when the United States took old Smith & Wesson 45s and just gave them to the Brits, they just didn't bother rechambering them because, you know, that's a lot of effort. Fuck that. So they just gave them the old 45 ACP revolvers. Genuinely, I'm quite curious what this gun has been through. If only it could talk, because yeah, I wonder if this actually really did see service in World War II. Quite uniquely, American tankers used these revolvers early on. Quite famously, if you watch the movie Fury, Brad Pitt's character has one of these revolvers because he sort of trusts it more than 1911. He's also wearing a first pattern tanker's jacket. Again, all of these things that sort of suggest that he is, he's from the early war and he's been around since, you know, 41 is obviously when America joined, but maybe he was in training in 39 and 40 and got all this earlier equipment. And then when the war kicked off, he just kept it because he liked it. It's what he trained with. It's what he trusted. Who knows? The Marine Corps, I think in the TV show The Pacific, there's a scene where Eugene Sledge makes good use of one of these, but also that is true. The US Marine Corps made good use of these in the early years of the war, even after the 1911 was, you know, very much standardized, since World War I even, but you'd be surprised. A lot of these were still floating around in World War II. And then also, one last piece of great little movie history. This is, of course, the model of revolver that is used by Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, actually, it's not this exact model of revolver because after World War I, Smith & Wesson continued to produce this model of revolver for the civilian market, and they had fancier features. The grips were a little bit nicer. They were built to higher quality. Some small tweaks were made, different barrel lengths, things like that for the civilian market. But it was, like, at its heart, the same pistol. Indiana Jones specifically has a, you know, 1930s commercial version of this pistol. He has a Smith & Wesson hand ejector Model 2, but like it is pretty much identical to this revolver. So this is, in a lot of ways, Indiana Jones's revolver in Raiders of the Lost Ark, despite the fact that he uses like 4 different pistols in that movie. So yeah, and then again, another great piece of Americana, because Americans, I do think, have left a very unique mark on revolver history. And I think generally firearms history overall is something that I think America has uniquely and significantly contributed to, especially in that like 1840s to, you know, early 1910s. I think there's a lot of stuff coming out of America that really changed the world, that changed the market, that changed everything. I think there are a lot of things. I mean, firearms in themselves was such a new technology that a new country like America had time to put its fingerprint on it. And I think revolvers is one of those things, like revolvers and lever guns. Those are two things that I do think the United States has been able to uniquely put its mark on. And Smith & Wesson has always been one of the premier revolver makers. So very, very cool to have this as another piece of history. Now, talking about all this American stuff, let's move over to, well, something that is not so American. In fact, 2 things that are not so American. Now this, some people might be confused as to why I'm bringing this out for a video about the United States. Maybe some of you know where I'm about to go with this. What we have here is, of course, a model of 1891 Mosin rifle. Some say Mosin Nagant. I really don't care. I kind of switch between the two. Mosin is just easier to say oftentimes. I know in Russia it was never officially called the Mosin Nagant. That is kind of a Western thing, or Nagant, however you want to say his name. I know in Russia they always called these just the Mosin or the 3-line rifle. They never really credited Nagant, and to be fair, all Nagant really did was the magazine, so who knows how much credit he really deserves. I have no idea. I don't care. I call this a Mosin, or Mosin Nagant. I really switch between the two. This is an original 1891. This is an original 1917 production. Got 1917 stamped right on it. It is a Tula arsenal. Why am I using this when talking about a video about American firearms and firearms that have helped build and shape America? Because obviously the United States was a huge producer of arms during World War I. For many of the European nations, they had shortages of small arms. They couldn't make enough of whatever they needed. And so a lot of times, a lot of those nations would go overseas and ask the United States to be a factory away from home. And they would purchase firearms, either purchase firearms from America that were already being made in America, or would issue contracts for licensed production of their firearms. And both the Russians and the French did this quite extensively. Actually, well, and so did the British. So did everyone. And so, quite famously, Remington, actually the same people that made my 1917 manufactured Mosin Nagants, or Mosins, during the First World War for Russia. So unfortunately, although I do not have an example of a Remington-made Mosin, I actually specifically sought. I wanted to get a Russian-made version because I wanted to represent Russia in World War I. You can get American-made Mosins in this country. They are around. As far as I know, the story goes that essentially, and why this really does matter for American firearms history, is as far as I know, the story goes that the Russians placed an order, production was going. Of course, 1917 also being an important year for Russia because that is the year that Russia bows out of World War I, the official kickoff of the Russian Civil War. We just made a bunch of these for you, like, do you still want these? And the Russian government was like, we are not worried about that right now. Like, we are kind of in the middle of something else right now, and we cannot pay you. We cannot accept delivery of these rifles. Like, we are in such disarray. And then I think when the whole dust had settled, they just said, keep them. They said, never mind, just keep them. I believe that is what I know about the history. And if I have any corrections or if I know anything else, I'll leave them in the video or in the description. And a lot of them stayed here in the United States and were used by the US Army in training exercises, both during and after World War I. And then also, quite famously, and something that a lot of people forget about, is the expeditionary force of American and British soldiers that actually went to Russia and fought in the Russian Civil War on the side of the whites. And American soldiers being sent over to Russia to fight in the Civil War were issued these American Mosins, because it made sense. Like, that's the rifle that you're going to find when you're over there. And again, that's a significant piece of, I think this is a solid piece of American wartime history. It gives me an excuse to talk about the Mosin, and I will say, here in America, there is a culture around the Mosin, because for a lot of people, especially before my time, or at least before I was a gun collector, you know, in the early 2000s and 90s, and even way before that, people thought they were stupid, useless commie rifles, and they were sold for insanely low prices that today genuinely make me sad. And I know that older people love to flaunt, well, you know, I got one of those in '97 for $32 and a full crate of ammo for basically free. It's like, okay, cool, like, fuck you. Like, what the fuck do you want me to say to that? Like, you're trying to rub that in my face. Like, I know you're rubbing that in my face, and it's very disrespectful, and I hate you. So, like, fuck off. Like, please, I get it. I get it. Things were cheaper when you were younger. I get it. I'm getting fucked by prices today. I get it. This is the worst time in history to be a gun collector. I understand. Things were much simpler back then. I get it. I understand. Band of Brothers and its consequences have been a disaster for the American firearms market. I understand. You can keep that to yourself. Stop rubbing it in my face. It genuinely pisses me the fuck off. So I get it. You bought this for $32 at a gun show. I didn't, so fuck you. Point being, these are still some of the cheapest rifles on the market, and a lot of broke college kids got these for $100 and a free crate of ammo. You know, the cheap garbage rod that I bought when I couldn't afford anything else, and it's what I learned to shoot on. A lot of people in this country have a very fond beloved of the Mosin. I do not. To be quite honest with you, this is the second Mosin, and both Mosins that I've owned are terrible. I'll try to make some pros here, but I'll say initially, I am not a fan of the Mosins. I do not think they're very good rifles. I think they are by far the worst rifle of World War I, and this rifle in particular has given me nothing but trouble, especially when it comes to cycling. When there's not rounds in the chamber, it's not too bad, but man, it's not good either. it just doesn't feel good, does it? There's like this weird thing with the Mosin where it gets stuck up in this like 45 position. Like it's not like a 4-motion like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's like an extra like 45-degree throw where it kind of gets stuck, and a lot of times you get there and then it's like motion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like it's just bad. It just doesn't feel good. And both Mosins that I've had are the same way. And I know some people say, oh, you just gotta get lucky. It depends on if you get a good one or a bad one. I actually do have, and I will say I have 3 Mosins now. My third one is by far the best Mosin that I've ever handled and is way better than my other 2. But still, compared to other bolt actions of its time, of its era, and of its type, like everything else is better. Literally everything else is better. I've had good trigger time on this, and on my other Mosin too. I don't like them. They're too long. They stayed way too long. Even in World War II, when everyone wised up and shortened all their rifles, the 9130s are still too long, and surprisingly, way too heavy. Way too heavy. For everyone going on about how the Mosin is such a simple, rugged, reliable rifle, you'd think it would be a very lightweight, simple rifle. It's way too heavy, and the point of balance is like all the way out here. Like I hate it. I don't like it. I want to hold it, back here where you put the finger grooves, but I got to hold it right here, which is not terrible. But again, it's just so long. It's so heavy. It's not fun to operate. The magazine is too complicated. I don't know. I can think of a couple things that I do like about these rifles. Honestly, actually, the sights. I actually think even on these World War I Mosins, I actually really like the sights. I think the sights are quite nice. I like them quite a lot, actually. And the 9130s are even better. The sights on the 9130, great, love them. Honestly, no complaints there. As much as I just said about how I think they're not good rifles and they're garbage and I don't like them, whatever, I have not had one fail to feed. And I'll give credit where credit is due, because both of my Lee Enfields, as I've said, have given me many problems with their magazines and feeding and the rimmed cartridges being a huge problem. A much bigger, thicker rim, and these, I have never had rim jam. With a Mosin, that interrupter actually works really, really well, and the magazine, despite being too complicated, works really, really well. I have never had feeding issues with these Mosins. I've never had ejection issues. All my Mosins eject like a motherfucker. Like you pull that bolt open and the round goes flying out at Mach 10. So very healthy ejection on these and very good feeding. I can't say that they're not at least reliable. They will go bang when you need them to. They will feed when you need them to. They will eject when you need them to, which honestly, there is value to be had in that for sure. But again, just compared to what else you could have, they're cool, they're iconic rifles. I can't argue the silhouette of these things is amazing and beloved. And my third Mosin that I have may surprise a lot of you. Maybe I'll flash it on camera. Why not, right? I like to spoil things for people. This is by far the best Mosin I've ever owned, and it operates by far the smoothest out of every Mosin I have. Not to turn this into a topic of discussion, but it's because of this. It's because of the bent bolt handle. It actually gives you purchase. Oh, actually, ooh. Ooh. Oh, hold on. No, there you go. It's not perfect. But it is so much nicer than my other 2. The trigger on this one is really nice. I don't know if I just got lucky, but this one is actually really quite nice as far as a Mosin goes. And I think a lot of it's got to do with this bent bolt handle giving you all that extra purchase. So not to turn the video into other things, but this will be coming more later. But man, that one is actually quite nice. Closest I have ever gotten to genuinely really liking a Mosin. The last gun for today. This is a French model 1907/15 Berthier rifle. Now this one, you may say, 1907-15, it's got the extended magazine and it's got a top handguard. Well, you're wrong, because, well actually, I mean, you are right about that, but it is a 1907/15. So to me, this was obviously upgraded post-war. They obviously added the 5-round magazine, and they added the top handguard. For those who don't know, these rifles originally came with 3-round magazines, so they didn't have that pop out on the bottom. It was just the wood here. They were originally 3 rounds. Yes, the French went into World War I with a rifle that used 3 rounds. I know they had the Lebel, but they went into the war also with a rifle that only held 3 fucking rounds, which is just insane. That is genuinely insane to me. And then they also originally did not have top handguards. And so in 1916, they made a pattern update and they added an extended 5-round magazine and they added handguards to the top. Famously, I know that the 1916 pattern of these guns saw combat as carbines. The long rifle pattern MLE 1916 rifles did not make it in time to see combat in World War I, so, whatever. But why am I showing this in a video about American firearms just in general? Well, 2 things. Number 1, to commemorate the American and French bromance that has been raging throughout history that I think is severely underrated. But also because, just like the Mosin, the United States produced a lot of these rifles during World War I. I think it was Remington, again, who was making these rifles. But as far as I know, none of them were accepted because the French had very, very strict standards of acceptance, and the American factories failed to make the rifles with proper interchangeable components compared to the French ones, because they wanted the French and the American rifles to be interchangeable components, which is very reasonable and makes total sense. But the American factories couldn't do that. They continually failed to meet that. And other things like the wood not being good enough, or the sanding or the grain not flowing correctly, like really, really small nitpicky things, the French would just say, nope, not good enough, we don't accept it. And so as I believe, I don't think a single US manufactured Berthier ended up making it in the French Army's hands. And so once again, these all stayed in the United States. Although unlike the Mosins, which stayed in the US and were used for training, I don't believe the Berthiers were used in the US Army. Rather, they were kind of immediately dumped onto the civilian market after the war. And so you can get a lot of these rifles here in America built by American factories here in the civilian market, and they are generally in really, really good condition because they never saw combat. I've not shot this yet because it is 8mm Lebel, which is very, very hard to get in this country and very, very expensive, but I would like to shoot it one day. It is already racking it dry. Way smoother than a Mosin. So I've not given my camera very much proper time to cool down, but I'm just gonna go ahead and try to record a quick outro because that's pretty much it. That is the collection of rifles that I have in my possession that are somewhat representative of something that the United States has developed or has been important to American firearms history in one way or another. Trust me, I would love to have something a little more modern in my collection, something along the lines of an M16 or an M1A, or even something further back like a Krag Jorgensen, but those things will come with time as I expand the collection naturally. The United States is by far the single nation that I have the most rifles from. Everything else I have like 1 or 2 examples. Actually, the Mosins are in second place with having 3 Mosins, so that's 3 rifles to represent Russia. It's pretty cool. So I figured it would be a cool topic to cover today because there's a lot of guns to show, and today is a special day for America and for American history. 250 years, pretty big deal. And I know this is a bit of a different format of video, me standing up and rambling around. Maybe I'll do more stuff like this in the future because I like being able to jump around and do something. I've always wanted a green screen. Maybe one day I'll get a green screen and then I can really do something fun. Thanks so much for watching. I will be back with tank content, I promise. We will be back with tank content sooner versus later. Like I said, I'm back from Germany. Got this shirt while I was in Germany, it's awesome. Got this hat while I was in Germany, it's awesome. I'm back from Germany, so I will be, as I said, I wanted to that trip, my return from that trip, to mark a recommitment to the channel and to content, and I very much intend to follow through on that, and hopefully this is proof of that. So yeah, special day for the holiday. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm gonna let you go. Hopefully this video didn't turn out too long. I'm gonna edit it, throw it together, and post it right now because I am recording this on July 4th. I recorded this morning and I need to post it before I start stream today in like 2 hours. So we'll figure this out. Thanks for watching. Bye.